meeting to order. It is Monday, July 9th, 2018. We are the Tracy United School Board meeting, and it's 6 p.m. We're located in the high school band room. I said that all backwards.
You're all good.
I know. Roll call finds all present except Michelle is absent this evening. Before we approve the agenda, there has been some changes. Under consent agenda, under employment ending, we have Stacy Moser, special education para, it's addition. And also under information, the memorial bench. So with that, I will seek a motion to approve the agenda with the noted changes.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Motion by Kevin Huber, second by Dan Rudd to approve the agenda with changes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Michelle, did you get in on that?
I did. I said aye.
Okay. Motion is passed 7-0. Next, we move on to our consent agenda. We have approval of the minutes of the June 11, 2018 regular school board meeting and the June 25, 2018 special school board minutes. Under personnel, we have new hires. Nicole Tupy, elementary teacher in Montgomery. Erica Bisek, elementary teacher in Montgomery. Audrey Dietz, a targeted services summer school para in Montgomery. Kim Sladek, targeted services summer school para in Montgomery. Sofia Kaunonen, targeted services summer school para in Montgomery. Tammy Burman, a special education teacher in Lonsdale. Under employment ending, Margy Schipper, science teacher at the high school. Haugen, math teacher at the high school. Tracy Stepka, .3 FTE, high school social studies, assistant cross-country coach, and also junior high track coach. And Stacy Moser, a special education paraprofessional in Montgomery. Recommended for tenure, Carrie Bach, Lee Center, Andrew Bastier, Lee Center, Bryce Bruns, Lee Center, Kami Butler, Lonsdale, Elizabeth Cromie, in Lee Center, Jennifer Dietman, in Lee Center, Andrea Dubnowski, Lee Center, Kelly Heller, in Montgomery, Bryce Jacobson, in Lee Center, Kyle Krasinski, in Lee Center, Ellie Ryan, in Lonsdale, Teresa Sardelli, in Lee Center, Colin Scott, Montgomery, and Eric Whiff, in Montgomery. We have the approval of the bills in the amount of $1,405,811.26. Also, a finance report, and I will seek a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move.
I'll second that.
I have a motion by Dale Boss, second by Ashley Receiver to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion is passed 7-0.
Members of the board, I'd just like to make a brief comment on our number of teachers who have earned the continuing contract or tenure, as it's oftentimes referred to. This is one of our larger numbers of groups that have come through, and they've worked really hard and have really bonded together as a team and have really made a difference in our district. So just as those who are retiring and we celebrate all they've done, it's important to honor those that have demonstrated consistent in their qualifications. And of these number, all but 2 did go through the 3 full years of probationary time and had very successful evaluations and positive impacts with kids and families.
All right, next, during our open forum, we've had one request this evening to speak at the school board, and she'd like to come up, Shannon. And Shannon's here to discuss the adoption of a diversity education program at TCU schools, including curriculum for students and training for faculty. And also, Teresa, you have to remember, Shannon, I saw Teresa. You have 2 minutes, and we'll time you. You may start whenever you'd like.
Hi, I'm Shannon Tita. I am an RN. I've been working as a nurse for about 8 years now. I work with children in various settings. I'm also a mother of 3, and 2 of my godchildren go to the Le Center School. So that's kind of why I'm here. I did a cultural assessment on them in April. And at that time, I became aware of incidences of racism that were occurring at the Le Center TCU school. At that time, I contacted the principal, and I talked to him about what kind of diversity curriculum that they had in the center specifically. But they didn't have any specific curriculum, so I started looking into maybe some resources for TCU. The Department of Education encourages all educational institutions to develop programming to increase cultural competency, not just for the students, but for faculty and staff. The community, especially in the center, is changing with the increased Latino population. And in all four of the schools, there's not other than the Latino population, the other minority populations, including the Black, Native, Asian, Pacific Islander, and biracial students, is like 4% or less combined. So the smaller student minority groups need support, and then also the large influx of the Latino students. I just want to go over, just share with you a little bit about the interview.
30 seconds.
What was that?
About 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
You have a 2-minute timer.
All right. Well, this is in more documents that you can look over later. So the Greater Mankato Diversity Council is who I contacted, and they provide diversity awareness training for staff and also diversity workshops for grades K through 12 with curriculum that's been researched and evaluated. They service all of the Mankato area public schools, and they would be willing to work with TCU to develop a K through 12 program and also teacher and staff training. And then I contacted Dr. Takamura, who's the education director, who gave me a little bit more specifics about the programming, which is in the material that you have, as well as contact information. And then there's the last page is the curriculum breakdown per grade level. Just a kind of quick overview about what the kind of things they teach each grade.
Shannon, I appreciate you coming in and speaking to the school board. As we've done before, we can't respond or anything to your information that you're giving us, but we'll have Ms. Preisler follow up with you as we move on.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Just as a few pieces of follow-up for board members to know. Shannon and Mr. Grensteiner and I had a chance to meet the Thursday before last week and reviewed some of the pieces here of the Greater Mankato Diversity Council and what they have offerings for resources. Also, make you aware of some of the work that we've been doing, where we conducted the Forum on Race earlier this spring. Had representation from each of our communities there and a large number of high school students at that session. We've also been a part, there's a crew of educators and community members who have been in this 9-month monthly sessions with Region 9 on rural diversity, racial equity in rural Minnesota, and bringing some of those pieces back. And so some of the it was really valuable to have Shannon share some of these parts and some of the things that we've already delved into in the work that we have been doing within racial equity across our district.
All right, next we'll move on to our informational items. And the first one up is Holly Spessard about our special education services review, I guess.
Do you have a need for this at all?
Nope.
All right, thanks, Holly.
It's not real exciting information, so we're just going to chat. Dr. Preisler, members of the board, thanks for letting me come and speak to you. I've been waiting for this report since they came and visited in January. So we were in the MD has a 6-year cycle of reviewing our special education systems. There's a financial report, a fiscal monitoring that we went through last year, passed with flying colors, and then there was what we were in this year, which was on-site review, which means we have a lead monitor come and tour all of our sites, and we also go through the record review like we have every other year in the past. So it's a little bit bigger this year because it's MDE comes and visits. So they look at what we call our TSIS, our Total Special Education System Manual, our Restrictive Procedures Plan, which just outlines how we will use restrictive procedures. And here at TCU, we only do physical holding. We do not have any seclusion rooms. So we only actually do about half of restrictive procedures because we're not doing seclusion. I did about a 2.5 to possibly 3 hour long interview with Linda on the phone one day. She's a talker, but she was wonderful to work with. We did online interviews then with our principals, our special ed teachers, our general ed teachers, and paras. I think we had about 44 paras, 16 teachers, and about 22 general ed teachers, somewhere in that ballpark of numbers. And then all of the principals had to take that online as well. Then she looks at our formal complaint history, which is, we've had no formal complaints since I started, and I think there was one maybe a couple years before I started that was wrapped up maybe during Miss Jane Taper's time. So that was on there, and then just do the record review where we're looking at student IEP files. So it's kind of how this big scope, and I think the report is somewhere, the actual writing is about 30 some pages long, so I'm gonna try to make it enjoyable for you. So we look at 4 areas: governance, facilities, equipment and materials, child find and evaluation, and IEP and IFSP, which are little kids and big kids, do process stuff, as well as the implementation of it. So the first area they looked at is the governance. We looked at all of our manuals that we have, our SEEK committee, which is our Special Education Advisory Council, which is made up of parents. They look to make sure we're having that, asking about what sort of things we talk about at those. Our service delivery, teaching models, and collaboration. So looking at how we're providing the services and how our general education teachers are collaborating with our special ed teachers, as well as our principals with our special ed teachers. And so just the whole look at how we're operating together as a unit versus silos. And then resources and supports for staff. And so we looked through that whole area. There was 8 areas that we could have earned citations in. We did get one area of concern, which is, as Linda would say, I'm concerned about it, it's not a citation, but I just want it on your radar so it doesn't get worse, or that you can make some internal adjustments to make it better. So within our area of concern, this was interesting, I actually kind of chuckled a little bit when I read it, but our inability to consistently employ substitute teachers and paras. Linda did make note that she knows it's not unique to TCU, that this is happening, in a lot of rural areas as well as the major cities, but we might want to reconsider our recruitment practices, was what she said in the report, which I thought, well, that was sweet, because she knows we're trying really hard. Our corrective action that we did need to make a corrective action plan on, it's called a CAP, was in the area of training, specifically for our paraprofessionals. We had 23 of our 24 paraprofessionals said they did not feel like they were getting adequate training in understanding specific student needs. So not just general special ed, but how do I work with this student, or how do I work with this student versus that student? So they were not feeling like they had enough training there. How to provide follow-up instructional procedures and activities to students, and that's really all it said. So I'm interpreting that to mean, how are they following up on materials that the teachers have presented that they're then trying to work with the student on, as well as building orientation. So as simple as knowing, where do I take my lunch, where do I put my lunch, where do I take breaks, who do I go to for this, who do I go to that. So I had a really great conversation with our lead monitor, Linda, on ways that we could get better at that. And so we will be looking to create some internal structures. I think the majority of our concerns were when we have a mid-year hire, that we don't have that extra day. We are like all hands on deck. Thank you for coming. Now can you, I think that's where we need to, step back and develop some processes on how do we make sure that a new staff member is receiving training before we just put them in with kids, which is, and I openly admitted to Linda that has happened because we have been so short staffed at times when we have somebody who's left and we can't fill that position. Filling not only our substitutes, but we had problems this year finding paras as well. So we'd have positions open for a while. So that's definitely something we will be working on. Another thing that I looked into, once I got this report, it helped me guide what I wanted to get for paras. So I found, Dr. Preisler shared with me earlier in the spring some para-educator material, and I wasn't sure I wanted to go that route. It's a little bit on the dry side, but after reading kind of what the paras were saying they were missing, I felt it was worth investment. So I bought $300 for a para training, and then I will read it, I'll review it, I'll try to make it a little bit more enjoyable for them to do at our early outs so that they're finding it useful PD. Because as you guys know, we've been providing PD for them for the last 2 years with early outs. So they weren't feeling that it was relevant, so we'll try to make it a little bit more relevant to them. So I think we've got a good plan to how to resolve that. But that was the only area in all 8 areas. Those are the only 2 things, and one is just a concern, and kind of like we all have that, Linda. Then she kind of went through and she did, for each of the areas, she talked about like strengths and weaknesses that were noted in the online interviews. These interviews, depending on what your role was, took anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour, depending on if you're a teacher, general ed teacher, or para. And some things that were noted throughout our interview process as a strength was the good collaboration that we have between our special ed and our regular ed, and multiple people said they really enjoy having special ed within our PLCs. So that was exciting. Special ed staff had made a mark that they were happy that they got to meet on early outs every once in a while to do some teaming, district-wide versus just within their sites, so they appreciated that. Kind of weird, oddly enough, early out training for paraprofessionals came out as a strength as well. Now we just need to tweak a little. They like having them, we just need to tweak what we're giving them. And the general education teachers said they really feel aware of who to go to for help, so that was exciting. Some topics that were noted of areas of concern and suggestions for improvement were it's hard to retain paraprofessionals and to get subs. General ed staff would like more training with an emphasis on special education and working with difficult behaviors. Again, with the difficulty in finding subs, and then more paraprofessional training. So it was kind of I think it was just a mix of a bunch of different things there, but definitely what came out was also through our CAP as the para training. The facilities and equipment and materials, there's 3 areas that they look at: facilities, equipment, and supplies, and room for seclusion. We don't have a room for seclusion, so that was fine. The facilities and equipment and supplies is really looking to make sure that TCU isn't giving general ed kids better things than they're giving their special ed students, or that we're not giving more technology access to regular ed students and then not offering it to special ed. And we had no findings and no areas of concern. When I was reading the notes, over 91% of our special ed staff felt very confident in their ability to access technology, as well as the spaces that they provide services in. It was interesting to note that it was a little less, and the general ed teachers felt that most of the special ed rooms were too small. So, interesting perspective to have, but that was something there. Some of the areas of concern or of positive were the La Center's Smart Room is a great resource. Everyone felt SPED had a lot of, special education had a lot of access to technology, so thank you, Carl. Lonsdale, I loved this comment. Lonsdale general ed staff reported seeing students in special ed driving their bike around the school and having fun. That was good. Some noted areas of concern, which I don't think will be surprising for any of us, but the life skills program at the high school is too small and crowded, according to comments. These aren't my opinions. Smart Room in Montgomery was lost due to needing more classrooms, and the new space isn't adequate in some people's opinion. Space is limited in the district, so it's hard to find spaces for those things. And some of these, I don't know exactly what some of the context around some of the comments were, but some general education teachers would like to see more technology used for differentiating instruction. I'm not sure if that was in their classroom or, they're just randomly thrown out there as here's an area that you need to, as an area of concern. But I was pleased that we had nothing there of note of concern, that in MDE's eyes, we are equal access. Everybody's getting the same treatment. So I was happy to find that. Then we had child find and evaluation, which is really trying to find and locate and service students in special education. We did have one area of concern and one corrective action there. And the evaluation area of concern was that 14% of our special education staff said they had never received any training on racial and cultural discrimination when evaluating a student. It's noted as a concern, not a cap. But to address this, I will be working with both Mr. Vold, our school psychologist, and our new incoming school psychologist, Ms. Ray, on ensuring those practices are understood by all staff. I know that Mr. Vold understands it, We just need to make sure that the 14% of teachers who don't do. So we'll work on that. And our area that required corrective action is due process compliance, and that was a timeline citation for frequency of reeval, which just means reevaluations have to be done every 3 years, and we missed one of those, one or two of those, and if you even miss one, you typically get a cap on that. Those are not tough, we will be diligent, but those are interesting because we have to have 100% compliance for 3 months on every student in that time frame. So we will be working hard with trying not to be big brother, but calling and being like, where are we at with our timelines? Are you getting this done? And we'll review it during workshop week. And so we've got some processes in place to make sure that we're doing better in that area. I, to be honest, wasn't surprised of that citation as it has been difficult. Our one school's like has struggled a little bit to try to be on top of all 4 sites. So it'll be a nice to have too. Topics that were noted as a strength is that people feel like we follow the SPED law closely. Our Help Me Grow timelines are followed closely, which is our littles, they call the state hotline, they transfer that to us. We have 45 days to respond or to get it all wrapped up, and we didn't have a citation there at all. We met all 45-day timelines in that. And people noted that our RTI interventions are happening more and more often in the school system, which is, of course, a step to try to keep kids out of special ed, and we're having enough documented interventions that's really helped the evaluation process. So that was a bonus. Areas of concern were that general ed teachers would like more pre-intervention ideas to try to help those kids prior to that special ed referral. People noted that there's 3 elementaries and they all have different referral processes, which makes it difficult to standardize interventions. And people want their school psych to be more involved in that pre-referral meeting, and I think that can happen now. That we'll have to. And the last area, IEP and IFSP processes implementation, 7 areas for finding. We had 1 area of concern and 1 requiring corrective action. Area of concern was an inconsistent manner in which SPED teachers shared IEP content with their paras. All teachers know paras have access to IEPs, but paras aren't knowing that. So we'll need to sit down kind of again and do in that back to school workshop week and just talk about that reminder. I think they just need a reminder that paras can access special education documents so that they know how to work with the student is really what MD says. If a para doesn't, there's a chance the IEP isn't being implemented correctly. So easy fix. We'll go through that with the teachers. It'll be easy peasy. And then again, we had a timeline citation for IEP development, but this also makes sense to me because if you have an ER that's late, your IEP will be late because that process drives everything. So again, we'll have 3-month window of 100% compliance for all IEPs, and we'll monitor that. And then we report back to the state with all the MARS numbers of all the students we had IEPs over those 3 months time, and then I just say we met them. So it's not like any more corrective act. They don't come and look again. It's just they take my word for it. So that's helpful. So out of all of those, I was really, really pleased when we only had 6 citations, and only 1 of them had to do with anything outside of due process. So I was really excited for our staff, and I think everyone has just worked really hard to really bring our special ed program to top notch. So I was very pleasantly pleased when I opened it up and skimmed. In fact, I don't know, Dr. Pricer, when you opened it, but I just went through quickly and skimmed it to look for, it says corrective action, none. So I just went none, 1, okay, none. So it was a fun one to read, and I was excited to get it and report back to you guys that I'm really proud of the special ed department. They worked really hard and made great improvements over the last 4 years. Any questions?
Thanks for all the work you've done. Being a good leader and getting to where you are.
Thank you.
Do they send the survey out to all of the general ed? Just the ones that
They're
co-teach
percentage-wise. They did a percentage of our general ed staff. And so the way we did it this year is I said to principals, I need this many staff, and they chose.
Oh, okay.
But then if they chose like clusters of like 1, 2, 3, 4, then I'd get a call and say, I need more 7th, 8th grade teachers, or I need another science teacher because I don't have science represented in here. So although it was our choice, they apparently had some parameters they wanted followed and just didn't tell us, but it worked out well. And then if you didn't have enough, then she actually did on-site interviews with people, and we didn't have enough in 2 of our sites, so she did on-site interviews with teachers, and then teachers could request an on-site interview as well. And so we had 2 teachers, one general ed teacher and one special ed teacher, request to meet with her and do an interview with her. But nothing of note that she decided to share with me came out of those that I know of. So,
Oh, good.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Holly. You know, you're exactly right. It's a full team effort. And as I think back to my first weeks, months when I started, there was a number of parents who wanted to meet and talk about concerns within special education. And those same parents have commented many times at the turnaround that's happened that it's not only in the structures and systems and programs, but the mindsets, both in special education and general ed. And that's a real credit to our staff and to you, Holly, and your leadership. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next we have our solar garden information.
Good evening, Dr. Breisler, Chairman Cronick, members of the board. I'm Carl Mink, Director of IT and Facilities at TCU, and I'm very pleased to be bringing you this solution. As you know, we visited a few of these over the last 4 years. This is the 4th that we've done a deep dive on. And this is a value of solar garden subscription program that's been presented to us by Nokomis Partners. And Nokomis is an incorporated business in Minnesota. They work with contractors, financiers, and construction firms all within the state of Minnesota. And what's significantly different about this program, and why it really is a program that we should consider, I feel, is the way that Excel is now crediting and valuing what solar energy is bringing back into their grid. So you have all seen on Highway 99 and Highway 1321, Highway 14, a whole cadre of these gardens popping up. And one of the things that's indicated to me over time is that when you have a utility company making those discretionary choices with their dollars, it means something, because they really are motivated by, being basically the monopoly in the area. So that being the case, what Excel has done has created, now that they know what solar pays back to them, and they have had a history with these gardens, they've created a fixed mechanism versus those mechanisms that we've had in the past, where they had a 5 to 7% guess of an escalator as to what the electric market or what the markets in general are going to do. In this case, they said, we've now had solar gardens in operation for 2-3 years. We know exactly what they're providing us. Here's what we can credit your subscribers in a fixed rate, which then tracks along with that utility over the 25-year term. The 2 impediments that really stopped me in the last 3 proposals that we reviewed were, first and foremost, that unknown 5 to 7% guess, which really amounts to a lot of dollars over time. And no one could give us a confident number as to what our payback was going to be. The other element was, if you recall, many of them had a 2 to 3 year cycle down where we actually paid them to capitalize their business. And then it wasn't until halfway through year 3 into year 4 that we actually saw the positive credits, and they started giving us the credits over and above our bill. This starts at 0, costs in the value of solar, and then increases at a fixed rate over time for that 25 years. So as you review this, and I would encourage you guys to look into the documents that are on Board Book, with a high degree of confidence in this program, I feel as though the Lonsdale site is something that we should consider and possibly bring forward in August to approve and put into place. In addition to that, Nokomis has also offered to assist us in an in-kind grant of $7,000 if we want to put, for instance, an educational or instructional solar panel at our site to illustrate, exactly what's happening with solar energy, how solar energy works, and more importantly, a monitoring tool which actually shows them the credits and the electrons that we're saving in an educationally appropriate curriculum that they also developed. So with that, I guess I would encourage you guys to support this in August. I really do feel as though we've done the deep dive, we've done the homework 3 times around, this into the 3rd generation of offerings as far as how this is financed and how the benefit to the school district is defined really is a good opportunity. So
They've changed a lot of things since they did it the first time around when we discussed it the first time. So
they have.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any questions or anything that I can clarify or offer?
Carl, in the information that you've given us per year is an estimated amount of, some over $8,000. Towards the end, I mean, if this keeps exploding, so on and so forth, could that number go up, or are we now then going to be locked into the $8,206 for the 25 years and then the $187,000 in savings?
That's a great question because, on the downside of that risk would be if we weren't locked in,
Right.
We'd be below that threshold. If we are locked in, we're guaranteed those dollars. Can we go over and above that? No, but you're not assuming the risk that
Correct.
the market doesn't significantly go the other direction in 5 or 10 years. As more and more opportunities for wind farms, as you noticed, excel, adding almost 1,800 megawatts of solar energy in southern Minnesota and the Dakotas here in the next 2 years, wind and solar. That's a significant amount of dollars of investment. So they see the value in it, and so much so that they've said, we're going to give this guaranteed separation or this guaranteed ratio over this 25-year term. So they're also kind of assuming that risk a little bit on their end because they don't know what's going to come in the next generations of solar panels and PV technology. But we do know that they're intending to spend a lot of dollars in wind and other types of alternative sources. So we did also cost out a 20-year option. It was not nearly as attractive because the capitalization again happens on that front end. And it's good when you can extend that term. I was happy to see that it wasn't a 30-year term. And what's nice about this is it also runs parallel with the life cycle of a panel and a roof. So as we look at opportunities for other solar ventures, whatever the credits are paying back runs in the same timeline that we finance other opportunities should they come to bear in the future. So,
would they put the solar panel on the roof in Lonsdale, or would they put it like to the side so the kids can actually see it, or things like that? Where would that be going?
So that's really up to our discretion, and what we're looking at is a timeline in September where they're going to do the costing and final numbers. If that $7,000 can net us an entire array of solar panels, say of 4 or 6 panels, they have a nice fixed installation that's actually at ground level, where you can walk around, you can see the parts and components, they can actually touch the panel, get their hands on it, and that energy can be used specifically for small projects out in the grounds, maybe to light some catwalk lights or firewalk lights or the nature walk, or provide lighting on the deck up at the nature center. So there's a lot of options that we can consider. And the exciting thing about that is with the educational opportunity, we can engage our students and our staff and our communities to allow that to evolve with things that they would want to be a part of. And
Great segue into my next question.
Yeah.
The energy that we produce from those panels, is that something that we can sell back to Excel for even a bigger discount, or can we use that energy in our school for greater savings?
And that's a great question. If we choose it to do in this fashion, it would be non-grid connected. So it would be a standalone closed loop that would provide energy for that site as an educational a tool. If we choose to grid connect it, then it involves another relationship, another type of contract. And that opportunity is being explored by our architects and engineers to consider an alternate for what we call a solar-ready roof, ready to receive the weight load, ready to receive the electron ingest at the site. But it's nothing that we've committed to at this time. But this educational panel is something that would really be wonderful for the kids, because the garden is, somewhere in Waseca County or in the Waseca area. So you can have a field trip to it, but it doesn't have that daily association, going in the door and seeing, where some of their electrons actually come from. So
Carol, they're predicted to come online in July of 19, correct? The completion of the solar gardens? These three that we're discussing here?
Yes. That
So
would
what
be,
transpires in the 11 months from the time we sign on to, are they looking for more partners or what?
yeah.
I mean, why a year out, I guess?
Yeah, well, there's a number of things that have to be put in place. First of all, Excel's just changed the rules, and that's what kind of availed this VOS opportunity to us. So in that time frame, they've been aligning financing, construction companies, acquisition of material. Along with that, too, they want to have a guaranteed subscriber base. So one of the linchpins for me was when we went to Minnetonka schools and saw the very, very forward-thinking, forward-leaning ideas that they're doing in every area of their district, and how they're managing their lighting controls, their system controls across the entire district, but also in their larger spaces. And Nokomis did sign Minnetonka to one of their gardens just in the last few weeks here. So that, for me, says, you know, these people have been very thoughtful. They've been very, again, forward-thinking. And their analysis is kind of aligning with what, you know, I'm seeing as a value here. So to fully answer your question, it's also construction schedules and timelines, and then making sure that the subscriber base doesn't put the rest of the project at risk. Permits are signed, contracts for VOS, the value of solar, are signed with Excel, and now the financing is in place with Excelsior, and they're just looking to get a few more customers, and then build starts next spring.
And they're confident that'll happen?
Oh, yeah. Yep. Very.
Much more so
Than
than
they
what
were
we
5
had
years ago.
heard before. Yes.
Yeah.
Great questions.
Yeah, good questions.
Will anything change with the service that's already being provided, like, you know, like with regular electricity that you get in a school? Would there be, is there any risk with that?
Yeah, that's a good
Solar?
question, too. You know, the way that this works is we pay for, the Excel grid as a whole is providing electrons to us. And there's various points of what we call generation on that grid that actually feed into the larger network to provide us our power. So our risk is mitigated by switching stations and substations that exist between here and Waseca, because there may be many hops and endpoints in between there to what we call an aggregation point, where it's redistributed then to the larger networks and you know, networks like Lonsdale that are a little bit more rural, right, than some of the other main areas of Excel. So there is no risk outside of you know, us blowing a fuse at the site, but that wouldn't be their fault.
Sure.
Yeah.
Insurance-wise, our regular insurance would cover all of those type of, you know, things that possibly could happen
Yeah.
that are out there?
Yeah, you know, the only thing that really would require insurance are those capital items that we invest in. So if we chose to put, you know, the solar panel array as a, you know, basically a display or an illustration tool, an education tool there, we would have to add that to our rider.
Yep.
But these are things that are no different than a flagpole or,
Right.
you know, other types of furnitures and things that we have around the site that are on our umbrella coverage, so that would be covered.
And I think to clear it up, when we're talking solar garden, that's not necessarily solar energy we're getting. That's just another way for them to produce
Correct.
energy into their grid.
Exactly.
So it's not like we're getting that solar energy from that garden. They're supplying their grid, we're just investing in
Yep.
the partnership with.
Mhm. That's exactly right.
And our reason for looking at this for TCU Lonsdale?
Yeah, you know, Lonsdale is really the only site across the district that has provided service, electrical service by Excel. So Montgomery, the high school, K-8, La Center, and the surrounding properties on La Center are provided electricity by MVEC, Minnesota Valley Electric Cooperative. We are engaging conversations with them to consider the same, at least for net metering, if we were to choose to do, you know, a solar array sometime down the road, but most definitely to include us in opportunities that MVEC has kind of alluded to for solar gardens that they're choosing to build themselves. So we're encouraging our providers in Montgomery and La Center, our last mile provider, which is Minnesota Valley Electric Cooperative, to consider the same. It's a great opportunity in education because we have, you know, we use electrons in everything we do. So there any other questions? Great.
Is there any other information that you as a board feel that you would need for us to gather in order to make a decision about at least even the contract for solar garden aspect?
I'm going to read through everything in more detail. That's all. I think
Very good.
Okay. So we know the greatest concerns before were the variable rates. There was no, for sure. Definitely way far out on any solar gardens being prepared to be built. And that reliance on state and federal subsidies in the past, which are no longer the case.
That's a good point.
So the fixed rate, the elimination of subsidies, and so it's just a straightforward plan. And having gardens in the area that are shovel ready take those risk factors out. So.
Very much so.
We'll anticipate for us to bring this back in August for an action item.
Good.
Thanks.
Thanks for your
Carl.
time.
Thanks, Harold.
Up next is our strategic planning process.
Yes, this is a follow-up from our dialogue during the work session at the end of June. And at that point, I brought forward a couple of possibilities on strategic plan. And in our discussion at that point, really, there appeared to be consensus from the board that rather than going with a full-blown start from scratch strategic plan, that where we are as a district and all of the implementations and work we have done so far really would lend itself more to us digging deeper into our operational work and doing what we do but better. It's kind of the dialogue we'd had at that point. And so from there, I did follow up with Dennis Cheeseborough on what next steps might be, and also asked him the questions that were posed at the work session. The question on the 3-year board agenda, what does that really look like? He shared that what it does is it maps out the governance work that becomes parallel to the 3-year operational plan. So the areas of emphasis are on district policy, how that supports a governance model and the operational work, operational oversights, some of those benchmark points and everything for the development and implementation, board development and practices, really bringing the board's work as a collaborative governance team to high levels, and what kinds of practices can help to be effective in supporting the operational plan, and then superintendent relations, some of those checkpoints there as well. So those were really the core, and stakeholder engagement ahead down below. So how to really effectively engage stakeholders, again, in alignment with the operational plan. The other question on, can or should the board be involved in the site leadership team operational review and work? He said that is not needed, isn't typical to occur. I did follow up with him with a further question on, what if the board feels that they really want to? What pros and cons might there be to that? So I have not had that response yet. We looked at some dates in August, trying to think of that full data day retreat that we talked about, and he's been booked in August for a little over a year. So we are not going to get an August date, but we were looking at some dates that might align with the November and December early releases, because these are pretty long sessions. And so we're still working through what those steps might be or dates might be, and what the formation of those groups would be that's realistic to, one, have good representation, but is also small enough to get the work done in a really efficient, effective manner. So that's still being worked on. Some of the aspects that he shared, starting with that mission delivery point, really having a vision of the daily. What does it really mean and look like to be a student, a family, and employee within our district from an operational standpoint? What are the key strengths and needs for improvement in such things as academics, social emotional development, and career life skills within what we provide in educational settings here? And then also strengths and needs for improvement within our district operations, kind of fitting with our strategic direction on systems and structures. And then classroom theory of action, really identifying what are those 5 to 7 key elements in teaching and learning that should be in every classroom and learning setting. We talked about that, how do we eliminate the variability? How do we have some core consistencies? And that doesn't mean that everyone does exactly the same thing on every day, because there's still an art to teaching. It's not all science. And we want that individual strengths of our educators to come through. But what are those 5 to 7 elements that really should be occurring across the way? And how do we know they are? And how do we support that they do? And then another aspect would be, again, that review of our district vision card. Is it really measuring what we need it to measure? Is it giving us the information that we need in making some decisions? And then finally, that 3-year operational plan report with key strategic directions, our school improvement plans and processes, and department improvement plans and processes. So those are some of the things that he shared with me. I know we had quite a bit of dialogue as a board at the work session, but what other questions have come to mind or thoughts on this?
I didn't have any additional ones, but I thought we had a good discussion at our last meeting. So.
I thought so too. I think we move forward with it and get the ball rolling.
And I think the key message is do what we do, but do it deeper and better, and support so that it can be, and then have some come out with results to be able to prepare us for when it's time for the whole fresh strategic plan, because that time will come. And this really is looking at a 3-year of digging in on this before we consider the new stuff. Okay. And I think our staff will be a sigh of relief, because they've worked really hard and they're proud of the work they've done. But we all can acknowledge that if we can eliminate variabilities and be consistent in our supports, and I think you even heard that from Holly's report, the more consistent we can be, the better off it is. All right. Thank you.
Madam Chair, do we need a motion? Nope. Thank you.
Next we'll move on to our district vehicle.
Yeah, once again, this was a discussion item at our work session, and as the board, just like with the strategic planning and with this topic, asked that we bring it forward tonight as information. That's why there isn't an action item, but really bringing awareness of the fact that, TCU currently has 3 vans that we utilize, and we use those for district staff to drive when attending outside of district meetings. They are not used on the day-to-day, like if a teacher is at multiple sites for their position. That they are not used for because they are too busy with other areas. Transporting of small numbers of students for events or activities, or even from one school to another. Sometimes we have some of our students, like for example this spring we had avid students present at our TCU La Center and TCU Montgomery, using our school vans to be able to transport them in a safe manner. And then we do use all 3 of them for driver's education, and it's not just in the summer any longer. We have it behind the wheel happens in the fall, in the winter, in the spring, and you got to learn how to drive in all 4 seasons of wonderful Minnesota. Because we utilize the vehicles for that occasional transporting of students, we do need to follow state statute of type 3 vehicles. And one of those requirements is that they cannot be over 15 years old. And 2 of our vehicles are getting close to that time, with the 3rd one not far behind. And so our thought was to try to do a cycle so we weren't getting hit with all 3 needing to be done at the same time, which would be a huge capital expense for us. And so in that, at that point, we took a look at the use of vans and how many people are in them. There was a thought that we could trade one of the vans, or we would not trade in the van. We'd keep the van for non-student transportation uses, but instead replace that van for student transportation or other types of type 3 vehicle pieces with a car. Cost savings, better gas mileage, and just gives that variety of impacts for, again, students being able to, within driver's ed, have a car versus a van, but also sometimes it's only 1 or 2 people heading off to a meeting in Mankato, and having a big van isn't necessary. So began to take a look at what the options were, had some figures that came for a couple of vehicles, or some vehicles both from Factor Motors in La Center, and also from a car dealership out of New Prague. found once again that Factory Motors was extremely competitive, and the cost they had was right in line, and really gave a cost-effective option for us. I know that Mr. Schroeder was taking a look at things and options, and Mr. Huber had a chance to visit with I want to say Brad, but that's home plate. Paul, thank you. I had Gary and I had Brad. And took a look at some options. And we did come to the determination of purchasing a vehicle. It is a Ford Fusion. It is 2015. And it would have still warranty on many aspects because of its low mileage. And it did come in at a purchase price for $16,900. And so it was able to be funded through operating capital, which is a reserved account. It is not an unreserved fund one. So that was a good piece as well. And so we anticipate it to begin to be used in the next week as we're getting it all fully licensed and under our insurance, and also branded as a tax exempt, but also Tri-City United vehicle. So I know there was a great deal of discussion at our last meeting. The determination was to bring this forward so that we're really letting our public know about why the need was and what the rationale for what the purchase was. And so that open and welcome any questions, and I know that Mr. Schroeder is here as well, and questions or comments?
I think we covered it.
I think it's always good when we can purchase locally and support businesses within our communities, and this is just one that fit really well with Factor Motors. It's a nice looking car. I sat in it, but I haven't driven it. But, so it would be used for all of the reasons, all the rationales, the others. As I said, we are going to be at a point where we're going to need to replace one of the second vans, as that is also at that 2008, and our 15 years is ticking. And also they get to a point where they kind of start to nickel and dime you. And then we won't be far off with the other one as well. So kind of doing that rotation, but do anticipate that the other two vans are going to need to be vans rather than cars, just because we do need to have somewhere you're transporting more than the number of people within a car.
Any other questions? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to our building project update.
All right. I'd mentioned in the notes that we probably wouldn't have some pictures, but it appears that we do. But I'm just going to kind of speak through a few steps. First of all, the TCU Lift Center roof replacement is going well. We've had a couple of meetings so far as the construction work. We meet on a weekly basis. It's a real quick touch base on where the progress is, if there's any requests for information, those kinds of things. Reports from both the site administrator or site overseer from ATS&R has been really pleased with the work. He's had both scheduled and unscheduled visits to the site, has found in all of those situations that things are right on track and things being done the way they should. Neiman Roofing has been open and thorough on what they've done. The roof for the over the gymnasium is anticipated to be completed this week, the latest beginning of next week, and except for detailing. So they basically, as I shared at the work session, they dig off the rock, they peel off what needs to be peeled off, and they roll out the EPDM right away so there's no openings. When we had the heavy rains, I went inside, and Carl went at one point, and I went later on in the day when the second round of rains came, and took a look inside, and the facility was dry as could be. And they have layered a layer of plastic and everything over the gym floor. And so there has been some dust and that kind of stuff that's fallen on there, but absolutely no water intrusion whatsoever. So that's been a really good sign. Then they'll get started with the roof over the commons and office areas, which is the long-term facilities bonded roof. And because they're not needing to dig all the way down and tear off all of the insulation there, because there are some parts that are still really very good, that should go even quicker. The pieces that are going to probably take a little bit more time is when they're going over some of the gas lines. They're going from the higher level to the lower level from the two levels of the roofs. But things are going right as planned.
When do they think they'll be done with that?
Well, it
Obviously,
was.
it's weather dependent. But.
Yeah, weather dependent. They were anticipating the week of August 13th, but they've even moved that up now. So end of July, beginning of August. So is this going to open for me, Carl? Or am I going to have to log in?
You should be able to see it.
That away. We'll just see a couple of quick pictures because some of these are updated from before. As you can see, getting some of the materials up on the roof. As they're working on. So what's being removed. They haul it all the way. Not too much left laying alongside of the building in the evenings, but there's some, but not a mess. Any means? Tearing up the rocks there, and then said they roll it out and they seal from one to the next, and it's adhering really well. And because it's the thicker, because it's the 30-year warranty, it's really laying out much flatter than what the 60 has for them in other cases, and adhering to the roof much more tightly. One of the skylights that we're taking out, because the skylights are just like holes. Water flows straight through, and that's what was happening. So we're pulling those in. Pretty amazing. And exciting. I know roofs maybe don't sound exciting. I think this has been really exciting. And also, you know, again, a great sign of holding to our word. We said our first project that we were going to do everything we could to have the TCU La Center roof replaced this summer and get that all sealed up, because you have to have that sealed before we're going internally with HVACs and those kinds of things. And so this is a big step and a really important one. Other aspects within the updates, TCU Lonsdale bids were issued today. Brenda received a call from a contractor asking some questions, so that was good, knowing that it's out there. The bid opening will be July 31st at 2 o'clock in the district office. In one of the updates, I'd shared that the state of Minnesota, you know, they do review all plans, and they've said they will not review them until they have been completely issued, so that there aren't any addendums or anything. And then they would only do that, they'd take their full 60 days. Well, interestingly today, in talking with Dave Baroni, now the state has said, well, we think we can do them in a 4-week turnaround. So we're kind of in a time of flux within the state here on some construction. So the initial plan was that construction at TCU Lonsdale would be at the end of August. With the 60-day, it might need to be the end of September. But now with the 4-week, we might be able to move that back up. But we'll make sure that that in the bid, it states, you know, that it could be in September, but they would be allowed to start early if the state review and permit is through. As far as TCU Montgomery and TCU La Center, really spent a great deal of time on what's the best practices now with what we know with secured entries. And there's been a lot that's come about in the last couple of years. Some of those best practices include holding people in the vestibule rather than coming straight into the office. So for example, as you know, here at TCU High School, you come in the main door, the doors during the student day, main doors during the student day are open, you come in and you can walk right into the office. Well, in a best practices, it would be that you wouldn't walk into the main office, you would need to be buzzed in. So you'd be held in the vestibule, buzzed in, check in, and then even be buzzed to go into the rest of the school. Where the reason for the double buzzer is that if someone comes into the office and is through a check-in process and you find that maybe they really aren't able to go and see that student, Might be a custodial issue, might be other things that would come through within the check-in that you want to have that next layer before allowing people to go to where the students are. So that's one piece that within those secured entries would be a part of the project. The security film, which we know has come about an awful lot, and in particular in your main entry. Granted, you have other windows as well, but what they've kind of found is that, at least within that main entry, it would give you some time to be able to hit some alerts. And it doesn't necessarily keep, it's not, gun-proof and bulletproof, but it is strong enough so it buys you time. And that's the whole thing within security, is buying time. And so we are taking a look at that as well. And so those pieces would be incorporated into the secured entry at TCU La Center, and then that preschool entry into TCU Montgomery. And then we're also keeping that listing of things to be able to incorporate in as features and equipment in the Safe Schools grant, which we plan to apply for. And we'd be wanting to use those for secured entry aspects within TCU High School, TCU Montgomery in the main entry, and TCU Lonsdale as well. So it's kind of nice to be doing this analysis now, so we can formulate that grant aspect. Bids for TCU Montgomery and TCU High School, issuing the bids on July 25th, with bid openings on August 23rd. And TCU La Center secured entry HVAC would be issuing bids November 5th and bids opening on December 4th, because that project cannot happen during the school year. It has to be in the summer. And so just a reminder again, because of that needing that extended summer of 2019, we do start the school year a week early already. So if you've been on our website, you see already, Tiffy's put out there, school supply lists are out there. First day of school is August 27th. Remember, we're starting early just to keep people aware of that change and the why. So, any questions or anything?
It's exciting. I love the updates.
And you'll need to try out some auditorium chairs yet tonight. Yes, it is exciting. It's exciting to see what's been discussed and planned and thoroughly thought through and supported by our communities to be coming true.
All right, memorial bench.
Yes, was recently contacted by Mr. John Schmeezing about their family's wishes to donate a bench in memory of his father. Fred Schmeezing has been in education for over 30 years, and most recently coached here at TCU for junior high football. And John and his dad were coaches together for a number of years, and I know that was really special to both of them and had a great impact to our students to be such wonderful role models. And since they have coached the junior high level, their games and practices have been over at TCU La Center, and one of the locations for the 7th grade has been that football field behind the primary building. And there has been a bench on a cement pad for a number of years, which has recently fallen apart. The bench has. And so in memory of his dad, their family would like to donate a bench. It would be brand new and would be made of plastic or a metal covered plastic, so it would be durable. It's not a wood that's going to fall apart. They are requesting that the bench be located at that practice field on that cement slab, so again, it doesn't impact mowing or needing to be moved or anything like that. No cost to the school district for the bench, the installation, or any upkeep whatsoever. And the timeline that you'd anticipate would be by the end of 2018 summer or end of August, the very latest, so that it could be there for this fall's football season. Now, the policy committee has been reviewing for a long time policies on memorials, which has come about from some other districts and that. And so we were at the point where from the committee we had kind of crafted out some of the key points of the other districts' policies that we felt would really fit well and what parts we didn't think would fit well. And so I'm working on crafting that policy to bring back to the policy committee. And as this request came forward, took a look at the other districts' policies that we've been reviewing, and this request would be in line with what those policy indicate. So it's not like we'd be just something that here a policy is going to turn around and change, in a month or something like that. And so bringing this forward as information for you as a board, oftentimes within donations, we only take action if it's at a certain threshold or if there's a certain dollar amount, those types of things. But this is something that will be visible. It is something that our community and our students would both benefit from. And it's a wonderful memorial to a man who devoted his life to children and to education and to family and community. And there would be a plaque on the bench as well, in memory of Fred Schmeezing. So any questions or things that you feel further information is needed?
Would we have a dedication for that bench?
They're not requesting a dedication of it, and when we've had like the bench out in the front of the high school, we didn't necessarily do a formalized dedication. I would think there'd probably be something informal with their family, but had not anticipated that, but that's a great question.
I know it was very close with John and his dad coaching football. They coached my son, and you could see just the love and passion that they had coaching together, and it was something that he was always very proud of, that he had that opportunity to coach with his dad. So I just thought it was, just from me seeing it, I just wanted to make that statement, I guess. So it meant a lot to him.
Yes, to both. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Then I will let John know that there were no further questions or concerns or information that was necessarily needed, and for that they can move forward. Wonderful, thanks.
All right, we are at our committee updates, and first would be our facilities. Who met?
Well, Ashley, Dale, and Carl and I met before the last work session. You kind of heard some of it because a great deal of it was on the solar garden, and you're going to hear the next parts of it with the long-term facilities and summer projects. But Ashley and Dale, are there any pieces that you felt of significance to highlight here at this point?
I don't think so. I think everything will be brought out. We should be good to go.
All right. And negotiations.
Well, we met with principals and custodians, got tentative agreements. They have to vote on them yet. And we meet with cook staff on the 17th.
I'm going to say all three. I couldn't say one.
Sorry, go ahead.
We do have a number of individual working agreements that we're working through as well.
Yeah, cooks.
We are meeting with the pairs. We've had 2 meetings so far and exchange packages, set some ground rules, of course. Our next 2 meetings are the 16th and the 19th. Feeling maybe we could be done on the 16th. We'll see.
We have a lot of contracts and working agreements in these even years.
Setting the teacher's contract.
Yep. All right.
All right, next we'll move on to our new business, and first up is the 2018-19 activities handbook.
Welcome aboard and your official start, right, Chad?
Exactly.
Glad to have you. Would you like the mouse to hit any of the points on the activities handbook?
I sure can.
All right, Mike. Thanks.
Board members, Dr. Preisler. Being in teaching and coaching for a long time, 27 years, it didn't make a whole lot of sense for me to go and change a whole lot of things when I've been here all of 4 days. So most of this, I've talked with Jason a lot and got a little bit of hit background on some of those things, but a couple things that I do have changed in your pack. Well, first one will be on page, throw it right here. Activities. I know most of you are aware we talked about adding soccer as a sport. I would say at least half of my first 4 or 5 days here was spent totally on soccer, making phone calls. We currently sit at 15 boys, and I know that was a directive from you to be in the 20s. And I have taken some of the kids that have signed up, I've taken them out for a burger and visited with them and tried to get them to get friends. 15 is as high as I've got. As far as girls, we're at 4. And most of this started as a 9-12 process, and we've kind of started going into 7th and 8th, and I know that's a little bit of a, some sports track, for example, 7th graders running next to a junior is not as, not physical, where in soccer it tends to be a little bit more of a physical sport, and having a 7th grader competing against a senior on the same field might be a little bit more than we're willing to go. But I guess at the present time, with adding 7th and 8th graders in, that they're part of my 15 and part of my 4. So of my 4 girls, one of them is a 7th grader, and I go all the way up to a junior. The boys, we do have 2 of them that are in junior high, all the way up to juniors and 1 senior. So it is a wide gap. We're running out of time is probably my biggest concern. I just met with the BSN guys the other day on ordering goals, and we're very short on time. Actually, almost not enough time. And I guess uniforms is a whole different battle in itself. So I don't know. I'm kind of getting to the point where it might be in our best interest to I might make a phone call to the participants that are out and just say, maybe next Tuesday, I know with this being broadcasted, maybe in the paper, it'll get us some interest, but by next Tuesday or next Wednesday, if we don't, we might just have to put it off for a year, and hopefully we have a little bit more time in school to gather more information, because I'm honest and truthfully, I'm just running out of options with all the time that I've just put into calling and trying to get people to come in and do that stuff. It's just not working. So that's where we're at with the soccer piece here.
Chad, before we move on.
Sure.
And Superintendent Price, I think our number was 18, correct?
20 was what
Yeah, it was 20. The next question, with the lower number of girls, I mean, if all of a sudden we would hit 20 in the boys in single digits, do we then run in the problem of Title IX?
We do not, because
Okay.
actually TCU has more girls sports than we do boys
good.
currently. So that is a positive for us. And I think that's one reason that if you look in the fall, the girls are having a tougher time. They do have swimming, volleyball, tennis, cheerleading, and cross country. So they in theory have 5 sports in the fall, where boys were at cross country and football. And this would be the 3rd. So it's much fewer conflicts with that. And even to go into that, 2 of our boys that we do have signed up for soccer are also cross country boys. And of the 3 soccer games we have lined up already, 2 of them are on the same day as cross country. Cross country, they will be varsity athletes, and this will be a JV program. So you got to be realistic that they're probably going to go to cross country, which maybe moves that number from 15 down to 13. So I think that's a strong reason that you guys made that decision to at least 120. So
Thank you.
Yep. The other thing here, just separating the Minnesota State High School League activities. I know sometimes that is, you guys have seen this in the handbook. What is a Category 1? What is a Category 2 and those things? And there's always very different rules based on that. So I just separated this out here just so you know which ones are sponsored by the Minnesota State High School League, and anything that would come over here on the non-Minnesota State High School League are activities we have here, but they don't necessarily fall under the particular rules of the Minnesota State High School League. Moving through, getting into our coaches, I've only had the opportunity to interview and be part of the, along with you, The Austin Pinky is the boys' basketball coach. He is the only one that I was part of. The other ones that are in colored in yellow, as they were done by either Jason or other people prior to me arriving here. So just giving you the heads up that those are changes. Moving through the rest of the handbook. This page here is something that I kind of have probably 2 or 3 areas that I'm going to work on a lot. First one probably is the lettering policy in this handbook, and I didn't touch it. I kind of talked to some of you about this in my interviews and different things, so that is something I definitely want to go through and just make sure it has a little bit more teeth to it. Everybody, I think the coaches were allowed to maybe just say the things that they want to do for lettering, but playing in most of the games doesn't really explain a whole lot. So we'll change that a little bit more. And then along with that, I don't, this right up here, we have football is 140, all the other sports are 120, and then golf is down at 110. I don't know why that is, and it's okay, but that's probably something I'll look into more with other schools in the conference and neighboring schools as we progress through the year. Sports fees and everything else was the same. Moving into the other parts of the handbook, I think the only other change was when we get into the violations here. There we go. And this is in both category 1 and category 2. We just added in the section under harassment and hazing, things that were not part of our handbook. They were part of the Minnesota State High School League, so that we had them, we could enforce them because they were part of that eligibility form that the kids signed at the beginning of the year, as well as parents, but it wasn't in our handbook, so it is now. And I think there was one other thing I was going to. Oh, I think it was just, I was going to talk about at the very back of the packet is where we had the requirements for lettering. And only other additional thing we did add was we just included managers in this. Apparently there was a little bit of question last year if people were managers and statisticians and still were a big part of the program, if they were allowed to letter and so on and so forth. So we added that in. A lot of this doesn't necessarily playing a half in a football game or those kind of things that aren't going to pertain to them, but they will actually be participating in the whole thing probably rather than parts. So in many ways they will qualify as far as the requirements go, but we'll fine tune that with a little bit more, but we want to make sure we had that at least covered. Any other questions as far as the handbook? Anything I can answer?
Well, thanks for making the changes that you did. I look forward to hearing what else you have.
Perfect.
Good deal.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
All
Jen.
right. I will seek a motion to approve the 18-19 activities handbook.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Dale Buss, second by Chris DeGhetto to approve the 18-19 activities handbook. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion is passed 7-0. Next, we have the MSBA renewal for the next school year.
This is the annual renewal in order for us to be a part of the Minnesota School Boards Association for training and for supports and for legislative advocacy. And also, we do subscribe to their policy services where we are able to get some of the model policies that come forward either from legislative action or from their own review. The value of that comes tremendously in that all of the policies they bring forward are vetted by legal counsel. And so we're not needing to do double work and have our legal counsel review those. We know as they come from MSBA, they do meet legislative statutory requirements and letters of the law. Now, we do have some policies that are not within MSBA policy, some things that we have crafted that we felt at TCU we've needed, but the vast majority of our policies really are based on MSBA formatting. This is a similar, fairly similar renewal cost. It's an increase of $137 from last year.
I'll make the motion.
All right.
I'll second.
Motion by Dan Red, second by Ashley Receival to approve, to renew the TCU's membership with MSBA for the 18-19 school year. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion is passed 7-0. Next, we have our FY20 application for long-term facilities maintenance revenue.
I'm going to guess that there's going to be a few different places that you're wanting to point out, so I'm going to do this. Yes.
We still need to look at it.
Dr. Preisler,
Little stress.
Chair Fronick, members of the board. Again, I'm Carl Mink, Director of IT and Facilities for Tri-City United Schools, joined by Gene Kopp, our Business Director, and also Eric Schroeder, our Buildings, Ground, and Maintenance Coordinator. And what I'd like to do first is just give an overview of projects that we have engaged in this summer to date. And Eric's got an update on what our custodial teams are doing across the district.
Mainly right now we're focusing on floors to get those done. We are well ahead of schedule of where we were last year in anticipation for everything being a week earlier this year. We will be ready to go with that. 90% of the filters have been changed through the buildings. Pool, we just had our inspection today, so the full inspection went good with that. Everything looked great on that. And again, starting next week now, we'll start looking at hard services and stuff like that. But mainly, it's just been getting the floors done. Those are what takes up the most time. So, but we are well ahead of schedule right now.
Thanks, Eric. Do you want to jump into LTFM revenues?
Oh, sure. Do we open anything?
I only opened the
That's fine.
executive summary, so go
That's
ahead
okay.
and open
Well-
any place else you want to.
No. So this is a LTFM. It's an annual renewal that we come before you for your approval. We have 4 parts that we have to submit to MDE. There's a 10-year projection for revenue, and that's built upon an APU estimate. And a formula allowance. So going forward, the formula allowance, as we know of, for the foreseeable future is $380 per student, or sorry, per APU. So that's our starting base for what our revenue projections are for LTFM. One note that's different about our LTFM revenue projection this year than we would have seen in the past couple of years is, recall we had the 2018B bond for LTFM revenue. That's our for LTFM funding for the center alternate roof. So that will be coming out of this amount. So the way that MDE wants it presented is to show we have the same calculation because you would have the same APUs and same formula allowance. However, at the bottom we show a reduction for the amount that we will be paying on the bond for 5 years. It's a 5-year bond. So over the course of fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 2024, over those 5 fiscal years we'll be paying back that bond. So we would receive the same amount in aid and levy. However, about $120,000 to $125,000 of that each year will be reduced from what the district has to spend on the projects that these guys are doing. And we've essentially spent it already to have this additional portion of the roof done. So that is basically what it is. If you looked at this sheet, it would say, here's our amount of, this is our APU estimate, and then this is the formula allowance on this line, and that's how it calculates out to this number of about $809,000. Another thing to remember when we are talking about this is what we're talking about is what are we going to get in aid and what are we going to levy our residents in fiscal year 20. So it would be on the 18 pay, 19 levy, which means the taxpayers pay in 2019, and we have that as our revenue in the school year 1920, which is fiscal year 20. So you have to do a little bit of a hop to make it there, but a year in and I've figured it out. So, so it's taking that long. So just to point out here at the at the bottom here, you see this number switches from an 809 to a 687, 690, 688, 686, 684, and then we go back up. So those are the 4 years where I'm saying, or 5 years where I'm saying we're paying back the bond. So this is item number 1 that we are required to submit. I'll let Carl and Eric talk about the expenditure side. That's the other piece, and that's where really the meat of the planning is, because they're looking at how much money do we have, which is generated from my sheet, and then they do all the work to plan and estimate and then work with the contractors. The statement of assurances I'll touch on quick. That's the third piece after revenue expenditures. Statement of assurances is a signature from Dr. Preisler to MDE that we are spending LTFM funds as we are required to. So only on LTFM projects. And then the fourth piece that we submit is approved board minutes. So those are the 4 components. But Carl and Eric have the big actual work of the components, so we'll hear what they have planned.
Yeah, so as we look at our 10-year expenditures, one of the things that Eric and I have put in place, one of the mechanisms and systems that we use, is a 3-year planning worksheet tool. And this is something that the facilities committee is very familiar with. And at one point in time, we started a baseline where we have the projects that we've completed in prior years and we've rolled over, and then we define future projects. And then what we are going to need to get the steps for funding in those projects. And along that 3-year trajectory, the first 3 years that we worked together, and now that we're into our first rolled over sheet that Jean has helped us kind of prepare and align our numbers with in revenues, we also have the opportunity to synergize our projects with the successful bond referendum. So that unknown in February, as we were planning throughout that process, two parallel tracks running now concurrently in a successful bond allow us to do in other areas of our construction renovation, right? Remember, LTFM can be applied toward those existing spaces, but it can't be used to build new square footage. As such, we have 2 areas of the district where we're going to have significant renovations, also needing to be supported and integrated with existing systems like rooftops, HVAC, boilers, things of that such. So as we looked at the life cycle and planning that we had for rooftop replacements, which are significant investments for TCU and also significant amounts of the dollars that we set aside for LTFM in the expenditure sheet, we now have a similar opportunity as we took advantage of for the center roof in the upcoming construction projects that are going to be occurring in renovated spaces next summer. So we're going to be taking components of that LTFM and creating a placeholder in that budget so that as the bids come out in August, we can align the opportunity with joint projects and construction so that we can take advantage and leverage those economies of scale and the synergistic effect of reducing the numbers of contractors and people that are working in and around each other and minimizing the numbers of dollars that we're doing in duplicating services. So holding those funds aside, we have a number of projects that we had discussed in our facilities committee meeting that were costed out at that time, but it made much more sense to do these concurrently with our construction projects for next year. And logically, then we set those aside and really prioritize those areas where we had safety and security issues and where we can improve the classroom and instruction environment for students, and use those dollars in this year to do our summer projects. And that's the list that you guys have available in front of me. So I have to thank Mr. Schroeder for bringing to bear again his cadre of networks and associates that he had from the medical community. We've made relationships with great new contractors that we otherwise would not have had reach to. And I also have to thank Ms. Kopp, because she knows how to run a table and also knows her way around Excel, and probably saved us 2 days of work with me and a calculator and a spreadsheet in about 10 minutes. So it has been.
It's the blanket offer's been put out that it's actually enjoyable for me. So
it was a lot of fun to watch, and she does very good work, and we have a high degree of confidence in that. So. These are the projects that we're proposing. We're looking at interior doors and some exterior hardening at the sites. looking at summer lunch program support for HVAC, DX chilling in one of our kitchens. We had an issue with a pipe break. We were able to take care of that this summer and also make some improvements for the long term of that band room in the center. We've got some commercial painting and branding projects that will be taken care of in our commons areas, as we have been chipping away over the last couple of years. Very much looking forward to that paint project in the center area F gym after that roof is repaired. It will be a very bright place, but that's again going to be next summer once everything is sealed up. We are doing a pilot, which I'm very excited about. It's a slate blackboard replacement. Some of the blackboards in the upper floor of area F in the center, which is where we're receiving that new roof, the bonded roof, not the LTF unbonded roof, but the referendum roof, have blackboards that were literally built into the wall, and they're plaster walls, and they've got metal lathing behind them, and it's just a very gangly animal to replace, because in order to put on new whiteboards, you have to demo the old. What we're thinking is we'll demo the old and then prep the wall for one of those 21st century classroom writable wall surfaces, and then just prep that whole wall as a projection and a full whiteboard floor to ceiling and wall to wall. So that's going to be a pilot program that we do this summer as well. In addition to addressing the level 3 program room over at the center, we've got old fixtures from science use, gas fixtures, faucets, sinks, that we're just going to box in and wall in, that is compliant with what the fire marshal is needing, but it doesn't cut into the basic outline of that room for future use. So we're making it safe and secure for level 3 programming, but we aren't necessarily gutting it and taking it away from its original intentions until we have a little longer on this trajectory, a little longer arc on this trajectory to decide what it is we're going to do with those spaces on the long term. So it's a good temporary fix, and it makes a very nice, a large square footage space available for that program. So those are the projects that we're intending, the ones that were shifted for future projects to align with construction next year. Air quality and humidity control, rooftop replacements, gym rooftop unit replacement as well, excuse me. I'll get that eventually. Ceiling tile and LED retrofit pilot. Okay, so we did all the low-hanging fruit the last 2 summers in the parking lots and some of our exterior security lights. Great payback, and they've already paid for themselves in that 18 months that we've had since we originally invested. We're starting to look at interior lighting and solutions for brighter, more efficient lighting that we can use. And remember, anytime we can preserve operational budget dollars, we serve the classroom and also our education staffing. So if we can save money on lighting and heating and air conditioning, it goes directly to our classrooms. So that's really our intention. We also have another area, the C, if you notice, we did note it, that $120,000 over the 5-year period for the LaCenter LTFM bonded roof, which is the 2018 B bond, as we call it. And then lastly, we had a very good meeting with Climate Makers, who is our HVAC electronic controls management company at the Lonsdale site, so that we can, again, take advantage of that synergistic opportunity where we're needing to supply heating and air conditioning to the new wing and integrate it into our current and existing control systems. And along with that contract, we're going to have a significant improvement in the overall energy efficiency of that entire site, mainly because the current controls are more granular and allows us to take better advantage of those technologies that are in the newer boilers and also the new DX cooling systems that they're bringing in for the rooftop units. Again, highly efficient. So those are the big rocks that we've put in place for both this summer and also for the long-term planning into next summer. As you think about these things, do you guys have any questions or anything that I can provide some more detail on?
Quick question.
Yeah.
When we hire in people to come do the painting and the branding and that thing, that part of it, have we considered or looked at using our own amazing art department to do some of our branding?
Yeah, you know, we've taken advantage of some, and that's a great question, Michelle. If you look at in the hallways, like in TCU La Center, outside of the gymnasium there, and some of the hallways over at TCU in the K-8. We've had Boy Scouts and artisans and local artists and art students do projects as they've been appropriate for the scale and for the materials and you know, the scope of the project that they would undertake for a period of time. Outside of that, the larger surface areas, our commons, our big hallways, that just has to be done efficiently with the lowest cost material and just boogie, you know. And we've found contractors that have the right people, the right equipment, and they're getting, you know, good bulk purchase agreements for the paint that they're acquiring for us, and durable paints. We're using the epoxy-based paints for you know, a longer term investment. So where it's appropriate and educationally valid and also I guess significant for those students, absolutely. You know, I think was it Mr. Desmond, right? Mm-hmm. It was Tanner, I think. Yeah, that did it as an Eagle Scout project, and I did a phenomenal job.
Yeah, I mean, I know we have like the
Murals. Yeah.
Mural.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Memorial
all right.
is always going to pop out.
Okay.
Murals in the Montgomery K-8 building.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I guess I was referring to, you know, there's nothing on these walls in here that say TCU.
Yeah.
Or in some of the hallways, some of the just plain hallways between in all of the buildings. Oh, just a thought. It'd be neat if we could use more of have more TCU, more branding in places where we don't, where we have students who could do it.
The invitation is always open to, that we'd always welcome that. If somebody would come and ask us, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I don't know if maybe students don't know that, or even the art department.
Yeah.
We'd certainly want to have some coordination in the timeframes and those kinds of things, and certainly in areas that are, you know, the workable spaces, so we don't have, you know, things that are way up high or that kind of thing.
Of course.
Totally.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yep. Very good. Good question.
Thank you.
Is there anything else we can provide some clarification on? Great.
I just have to say, I always appreciate your thoroughness when you come before us. I mean, I know it's like a lot, and sometimes I sit here and think, what is he really saying, right? But I get it, and you're very thoughtful, and then pairing those projects with our construction, I think that just makes a lot of sense, and maybe not a lot of people's brains work that way. So I think you definitely are in the right role you should be in, as Jean should be in with Excel. So look at that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But I always think that whenever you present to us, so I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Very good.
Any other questions? The other documents, just to, so even though they weren't open tonight, but the summer projects overview, that's what Carl did verbally tell us, but it's there in print for those who want to see, and then the 10-year expenditure plan fits with the revenues, and you would see that larger amount in the area of building envelope, which is what Carl was talking about in aligning LTFM with renovations within the bond referendum. So just to kind of let people know what was hiding in those documents, go ahead and take a look so that everyone can see everything.
Good.
All right, good.
Thank you for your work. This is
Thank you,
this is
guys.
not a short
Gals.
process.
No.
It's a very thoughtful one, so thanks.
Yeah, most welcome.
All right, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Kevin Huber, second by Christy Getto, to approve FY20 application for long-term facilities maintenance revenue. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion is passed 7-0. Next, we have our FY20 Southwest Metro long-term facilities maintenance plan and annual approval.
Great. Superintendent Preisler, members of the board, I'm Jean Kopp, Director of Business Services for Tri-City United. So this is a related piece for LTFM. It would also impact the FY fiscal year 20 timeframe, which would also mean our 18 pay 19 levy. This is just to clarify for this. So I'm requesting approval for the Southwest Metro Long-Term Facility Maintenance Program budget and the inclusion of a proportionate share of those projects in Tri-City United's application for LTFM revenue. This funding ensures safe, secure, and healthy facilities for our students attending Southwest Metro programming. TCU is one of 11 member districts of Southwest Metro. As per Minnesota statute, co-ops and intermediate districts, and Southwest Metro is an intermediate district, are able to access LTFM funds. So in order for Southwest Metro to access these funds, each member district of the co-op, the school district, the school board of each member district must be approved through resolution. So in the Southwest Metro LTFM budget for fiscal year 20 is $250,000, and Tri-City United's share of that is $15,183.58, which is 6.07%. And that share is based upon fiscal year 17 member usage of SPED and vocational services. So they go and look at what has each of the 11 member districts been billed for tuition services in those two areas, and then we're proportioned out based on those tuition rates. So that's how they get to the 6.7%. They set a budget of and this year it's $250,000, and that's how they allocate the amount to TCU. So if approved, this proportionate share will be included in the district's 18-pay-19 levy, which funds the fiscal year 20 school year. So typically what happens then is that it would go onto our levy, and then TCU would receive the funding, would actually receive the revenue, and then it's just an immediate pass-through to Southwest Metro, and it pays for the facilities that our students use when they attend Southwest Metro programs. So I have from Southwest Metro their resolution, but let's see if I can do this. So this is their budget. So we would be looking at fiscal year 20, and then this is here this place. This is the breakdown of this is the members of Southwest Metro, and this is the bed usage and the vocational usage, the total, and then the percentages. So here we are towards the bottom, 6.7%. That 6.07% is then brought down to this usage column and then multiplied by the 250. That's how it's allocated. So we're looking at this middle column. So that's how they do it. And that's part of the bylaws of Southwest Metro, of how they decide that we are going to split these amounts out between the member districts, which it makes sense to do it based on usage. So it'll swing a little bit from year to year because you would have Southwest Metro services sometimes can really, they're very obviously student specific. And so you might have years where we're utilizing them more than we do other years, or vice versa with other districts. So that's my recommendation, is to approve to support this levy for Southwest Metro for LTFM funding. Do you have any questions? Great.
Resolution to approve Southwest Metro Intermediate School District number 2988's long-term facility maintenance program budget and authorizing the inclusion of a proportionate share of those projects in the district's application for long-term facility maintenance revenue.
Seek a second on that.
Second.
All right, this will be a roll call vote.
Yes.
Dale?
Yes.
Yes.
Krista? Michelle?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Myself would be yes. The resolution is passed. Majority vote. Next, we need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Kevin Huber, second by Dan Rudd to adjourn the meeting at 7:44 p.m. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion is passed 7-0. The meeting is adjourned.